Okay, so this is AQA's Unit 1, Understanding and Producing Non-Fiction Text paper. We're going to look at question 1, which is source 1, and see what the examiner wants us to do. So here's the question, which invariably is either what do you understand or what do you learn about the issues of global warming. It's the same thing really. What the examiner wants you to do is demonstrate that you can read the text and from that text understand, interpret, infer what hasn't been said, and that's where you're going to get your top of band 3 and your band 4. Something that I like my pupils to do is to get rid of this little phrase from the article. It doesn't need to be there. It's obviously from the article. It changes the question to what do you understand about the issues of global warming. You don't need that little phrase to confuse and distract you. Obviously, base everything on the text and then superimpose your own knowledge and interpretation to read between the lines. The mark scheme is also very clear in that it just requires you to offer a clear understanding for a band 3. And similar to all the questions, the examiner is working their way up the mark scheme from the bottom, and once they understand that there's some evidence that the text is understood, they're looking for clear evidence that the text is understood, and that will be a more detailed response, focusing on more aspects of the article. Band 4, they are looking for the text to be fully understood, which means that the candidate has selected some reference from the whole, from the top, the middle and the bottom of the text, and that they understand the contradictions in the text, they understand the different points of view as reported by the journalist in the text. The difficult thing for a lot of people is here, the beginning to interpret and to make perceptive connections. To interpret the text is to apply your own understanding of what is being said and to fill in the gaps, to read between the lines, to infer. And a good way of demonstrating that is to look at the indicative content down here, which gives the examiner some suggestions of what candidates may say about the article, about what they understand. If you look at the first one, it says the starkest warning yet is to be given to political leaders that the dangers of global warming are increasing, so we should take notice of the scientists. That's a clear demonstration of understanding. This last little clause here, so we should take notice of the scientists, is interpretative. It's an interpretation. It's not particularly insightful, but it is insightful. The next one, the effects of burning fossil fuels and deforestation are now said to be affecting the whole planet like never before. That includes land surfaces, oceans and atmospheres. Again, that's clear, it's a clear understanding. There isn't much interpretation there, nothing particularly perceptive, whereas that one is slightly more perceptive. The next one, extreme weather events are on the increase in many regions of the world, whilst ice sheets continue to melt. This indicates that we will certainly be directly affected. Again, that's an interpretation. You can go further to get band 4, but that's a clear demonstration of understanding band 3. Just before that, you'll only really get a chance to read this once. You've read the question, read the text, and as you read, annotate. Start to think about the points you want to make. Look for the contradictions. Look for the alternative points of view. You're not explaining the language use. You're just showing the examiner what you've learned from this article. Some useful phrases to do that effectively is to say things like, I understand that there is an issue regarding, I understand that there is a concern. These phrases seem incredibly obvious, but you want to make it as easy for the examiner to read as possible. You're going to get the extra marks for your interpretations, but if you can make your initial point clear, then the examiner is going to be your friend. So here we have the article It's from The Guardian. It's from the environment section. So, that's just a quick scan. Climate change, IPCC issues start warning over global warming. So we have a headline, but we're not going to analyse the headline. We're not interpreting the picture. That's a different question, a different source. But what we understand is that this is about climate change, and there's a problem because this group of people are giving us a warning. So we read and we start to make points straight away. So I'm thinking, what do I understand from this first paragraph? Scientists will this week issue their starkest warning yet about the mounting dangers of global warming. So I understand straight away that scientists believe global warming is on the increase, not the decrease, and that they're going to warn us, presumably, about it. In a report to be handed to political leaders in Stockholm on Monday, they will say that the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation have now led to a warming of the entire globe, including land surfaces, oceans and atmosphere. So this supports the topic sentence up there, but I can interpret this in some detail and try and get a band 4. So the second half of this paragraph is more specific. It talks about fossil fuels. So I learned that fossil fuels are a problem. It talks about deforestation. Deforestation is facilitating this problem. That the earth is warming up, the sea is warming up, and this is going to be a problem because people rely on these things for their livelihoods and for their safety and security. If these things get damaged, people are going to be in trouble. So my interpretation is that this isn't just about global warming, this is also about the safety of the human race. I would go through each paragraph and find a similar point and interpret it in the same way. And then I definitely want to find a point like this, a paragraph like this one, because this is where I demonstrate full understanding. The scientists' warning, the most comprehensive and convincing yet produced by climate scientists. So I interpret that this is regarded as being legitimate and something that we ought to be concerned with. Comes at a time when growing numbers of people are doubting the reality of global warming. So I also understand that whilst the scientists believe it's a terrible threat, most people do not. And that, my interpretation of that is that the scientists are worried that people are apathetic, that they do not appreciate the danger of global warming. Therefore, they will not do anything about it. And if we go down further on, the perspective shifts again to more of a scientific perspective. And we get this, as the IPCC report underlines, scientists are becoming more and more certain that the climate change poses a real danger to the planet. My interpretation of that is that there is a battle between those who believe in climate change and those who don't. If I put that in my answer, the examiner is going to give me high marks. I'm going to use phrases like more certain in my response, just to show that I'm taking my understanding from certain pieces of language, but I'm not going to interpret that language at all. Here we have an example from a pupil in my class, and it gets 7 out of 8, all told. The first paragraph is very straightforward, there's nothing particularly great about it, but if you just go from the text, we immediately understand that the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation have now led to the warming of the entire globe. Furthermore, we can also understand that this issue includes land surfaces, oceans and the atmosphere. What's good about this is our phrases like this: we understand, we also understand. And it just basically recalls facts from the text. That's all you've got to do. However, it gets better. It says, next we understand that another issue is that extreme weather events, including heat waves and storms, have increased. Furthermore, we can also understand that this may link to the issue of our ice caps melting and could trigger the release of plumes of greenhouse gas and methane from the thawing Arctic. And again, that's not particularly, it's clear understanding, it's band 3, it's not band 4, but it just does exactly what needs to be done. Where he gets the band 4 is in this paragraph. He says, moving on, we also understand that the proportion of British people who don't think that the world's climate is changing has quadrupled since 2005. So here he is demonstrating that he understands the whole text, because he's given us the alternative viewpoint. That should be a tick rather than a cross, apologies. And then it says, furthermore, we can also understand just how worrying this particular issue is because of this short paragraph. 5% of respondents said no in 2005. Perhaps alternatively, we can understand that this sense of dismissiveness is an issue on its own. And that shows clear, perceptive understanding that the author of this text is trying to demonstrate that there is a conflict of opinion. I don't like the length of his quotations. They're a bit long for me. They don't need to be that long, but overall the interpretation is good. As you can see from that answer, there's nothing particularly brilliant about it. It just clearly demonstrates understanding of the text. And there's one example of perceptive analysis, awareness, and that moves him up into band 4, 7 marks. It doesn't get 8 because it doesn't do it on a consistent basis, but it does it once, and once is enough. Here we have another text, another question from a different exam paper, and it says, what do you understand from David Conn's article about Green Bank and sport for disabled young people? So this is again another example of how the question can confuse you. What do you understand from David Conn's article about Green Bank and sport? So again, if we get rid of that, it becomes much clearer. What do you understand about Green Bank and sport for disabled young people? This phrase here, I think, is put in to separate those who can from those who can't. It stops you getting a band 3. If you focus on that, that confuses you when you read the question. And again, we see this is from The Guardian. They like The Guardian. So perhaps you should start reading The Guardian for revision purposes. Merseyside's Magic Place, how Greenbank is doing it for the kids. So we know where it is. That's something that we learn straight away. We know what it's called because it's a proper noun. And we know that they are doing it for the kids. It's for the kids. So we are looking to find out what Greenbank is and what they do for the kids. And we're going to see what happens in each paragraph. In a high and handsome sports hall tucked away down a lane near Liverpool's Sefton Park, 2 teams of teenage boys, intense and animated, are engrossed in a basketball match. So instantly we get a sense of who the kids are, they're teenage boys, and what they're doing. They're playing basketball in an animated and intense way. So what do we learn about Greenbank and what they're doing for the kids here? We learn that they provide facilities for teenage boys to play basketball and get out all their energy. It takes some time even to realise there's anything distinctive about these youngsters, that this is an inter-school tournament for children with learning disabilities at the specialist, remarkable Greenbank Sports Academy. So we understand now that it's a sports academy. So Greenbank is more than just a name. And they specialise in running events for disabled children, teenagers. And my band 4 interpretation of that would be that not many people do that. And the opportunity Greenbank are providing for these boys, and probably girls as well, is unusual. So it's special. The students are from 6 schools across Merseyside, whose pupils aged 3 to 16 have complex physical and learning disabilities. The boys playing basketball are mostly autistic. One youngster has cerebral palsy. So again, we learn that the conditions of the boys are in some cases quite severe physical disabilities, and in other cases more mental disabilities. And that's something that we can learn. We've learned from that. Greenbank is the brainchild and life's work of the Chief Executive, Jerry Kinsella. So we learn that it's been set up by Jerry Kinsella, who had a polio as a child and found fulfillment as an adult when he discovered disability sport. So we understand that because, through his own experiences, he understands, he's aware that people don't get opportunities very often, especially if they're disabled, and that he wanted to do something to bridge that gap. I mentioned earlier that these texts often have some sort of shift, some change in tone or perspective, and this one does in a slightly different way. What this one does here is refer to the fact that funding is not stable. So aided then by and sent by grants from a range of bodies for which Kinsella and his staff are constantly applying, Greenbank, despite its unique provision, has no stable core funding. So my interpretation of this is that people really don't care about it. It's not something the government's interested in. It's something that people are interested in, but they just do not get the funding that they require. Therefore, people with disabilities are constantly discriminated against. Okay, so hopefully you will understand that the nature of this question isn't to be particularly clever. It's just to use your common sense to demonstrate understanding. So you read the text, you literally state what you've learned from each or a lot of the paragraphs, and to get high band 3 to band 4, you need to then demonstrate that you can read between the lines, that you can interpret what's being said. And if you do that, you'll do really well. So, final points. Make a range of points to summarise the whole text. Use your own words, but back it up with quotations. Remember, you're not analysing language. Do not do that. And look for those contradictions to demonstrate full understanding.